Hello, and welcome everyone. My name is Ariel Parnes. I'm the COO and co-founder at Mitiga, and I'm more than excited to kick off this first open, interactive, cloud-focused tabletop exercise. A couple of months ago, we started planning internally at Mitiga what is that we want to do for the cloud for the cybersecurity awareness month. And the first idea that we came with was to run an internal tabletop exercise. We see that with our customers, we do that every once in a while, and we see how effective it is in improving awareness, in educating on the uniqueness of cloud challenges in incident response, and in helping improve the readiness for responding to incidents. So we said, let's do that for Mitiga internally. And then someone came with this idea to open it to the public. We said, well, why not let others enjoy and watch this exercise and participate? And so here we are, and we're ready to kick off this exciting exercise. Obviously, we needed to adjust the exercise with the limited time that we have and with a different situation, but I'm quite sure that we are going to have a very engaging and fun exercise, but more importantly, educating. And so without further ado, let me introduce my friends here. We have Ofer Maor, our CTO, who will be enlightening us with his wisdom during the exercise. And we have Cody, our senior incident responder, who will be leading the exercise. Cody, to you. Let's get started.
Sure, thank you. So let's talk about who we are going to be in this exercise. In this exercise, we are going to be Kaizen. And so you're going to see Kaizen a lot in the screens. And Kaizen in this situation is a fictional cybersecurity company who is responding to a breach. So if you're on this call and we're talking about what we're going to do here, we are the incident responders. We are the security team for Kaizen. So if you ever get confused about who we are and the terminology, please feel free to ask the questions in the chat. But just know whenever you see Kaizen, that is a fictional company that is going to be us for this situation. The flow for the day will be that I'm going to give you a piece of information, right? And then it is going to be on you to put in the comments and in the chat and discuss what you think we should do with that piece of information. During that time, we'll also have insights from both Ariel and Ofer to maybe help guide us to where we need to be there. But that is also going to be how you're going to participate. Like I said, the flow is I'm going to give you a piece of information. You're going to participate by putting your comments in the chat. Let me know what you think, and then we can come to an agreement and move on to our next piece of information, move on through our incident response process. So without further ado, let's get on to what we're going to be dealing with today. So as you see on the screen, we have what looks to be a ransom note. So a little background here. We come into work today. We think it's going to be a nice, easy day. Halloween, we're going to get back, have some candy. But unfortunately, we start figuring out that people in SharePoint don't see files that they thought were there, right? So their files have been removed, and they also see uploaded files that they don't remember putting there themselves. And when we took a look at this uploaded file, basically it's saying that someone has access to our environment. They're making fun of us for putting sensitive data in SharePoint. And then if we want to protect Kaizen, which I said, that's us, that's our fictional company. If we want to protect Kaizen, we need to purchase 20 Bitcoin and send them to this Franken9 at Kaizen with a 3.com. So, I guess they thought that was funny, probably not funny for us in this aspect. But this is what we're faced with. So now that we know that we're faced with this, we need to start, making some decisions, right? So what should our first action be when given this information? Should we declare an incident, remove all SharePoint access, initiate an investigation, call for help? Please, like I said, put your comments in the chat. Let me know what you should think. If you think something else should be done, go ahead and comment that also. And Ariel, while they're putting comments in, discussing what they should think we should do here, can you give a little insight on why this would be a good first question, maybe the IR process or an IR plan, and how this plays into what we need to do for the day?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that comes to mind when we see this first initiation of the incident is what we call an incident response plan, IRP. Incident response plan is actually a document which is approved by management of an organization, and it is used before, during, and after an incident. It defines basically roles and responsibilities, and it helps guide the organization during an incident. And so basically what you would expect to see in an incident response plan is definitions such as what is an incident, and how do you define in your own organization what a severe incident is? How do you define materiality or severity? Things that we will discuss later on with regards to notifications, for example. Who do you assign for commanding the incident, for leading the technical efforts of the incident? What is the procedure that needs to go through an incident? Do you gather everyone in the same room? Who does what? And so on and so forth, different definitions that you have to have in ahead of time. And so basically when an incident happens, the rule of thumb is that you open this document and you start proceeding according to what the document defines. Specifically in our case, in Kaizen, we would have opened the document, and the first question would be, is this an incident? Is this a severe incident that we need to declare? And according to that, how we proceed, how do we proceed with the incident response? And so this is a takeaway from our exercise, making sure that we have an incident response plan. We can see that, get access to that in different websites, CISA and NIST and others. Very simple, have a very basic one, and then use it for tabletop exercise to see how well we are, is this document elaborated, and if we need to improve it. So incident response plan, a very basic terminology, a very basic document, and thing that we need to have ready to respond to an incident.
Great, thank you. And it looks like while you're going through that, a lot of people decided that, they're aligned with you. We need to maybe look at if we should declare an incident, but then we definitely need to start looking at, initiating an investigation, right? And I think that goes along with what you were saying we would do in this situation, which would be, we're going to open that document and we're going to see, do we need to declare an incident? And then from there, hopefully we start progressing through the rest of that. So with everyone saying the same thing, maybe A, maybe C, I don't really think there's a wrong answer here. I just think it depends on what answers we want, what questions we want to answer next. So with that being said, I think we said we wanted to go ahead and declare an incident, but in order to do that, we need to figure out, if we're going, what our severity is. And so for us to figure out what our severity is, we need to start an investigation, right? Which is what a lot of people are saying. We need to do C, which we need to investigate. We need to know what's actually going on here before we can actually make any other decisions, go through run books or anything like that. Okay, so thanks for everyone for putting in all those comments. Like I said, if you see people putting in comments that you like, let them know, collaborate back and forth. But I'm agreeing, we're going on with investigating here. So we have a team now. We have a team ready to investigate. We need to determine which questions should be asked so they can prioritize these tasks. And so questions that we have here would be, when did this happen? How did this happen? What's the scope? Who is the attacker? And why did they do that? So while everyone's putting their comments in there, questions, talking to each other back and forth, trying to help us decide what we should do now. Ardo, can you go into and talk about why prioritization might be important, why we need to answer these questions, or anything along those lines that can help our crowd out here figure out what we should do?
Yeah, one of the concepts that we need to understand during a crisis, a cyber breach or any other crisis, is the concept of fog of war, which means that basically during at least at the beginning of a crisis, it's very hard to understand what's going on. There is a lot of information flowing. Some of the information is accurate, some of it is not. There is a lack of structure in trying to digest and understand this information and generate what we call a situational awareness. And so basically, we need to overcome this fog of war. And for that purpose, one of the most important things to do is to be very focused on what is the action that we need to decide upon. What is the action that we need to make, or what are the different alternatives that we need to pick one of with regards to the action, and then take a step back and say, what is the information that we need to support this action? So for example, in our case, one reasonable action is, do we pay ransomware or not? And to do that, we need to ask a few questions. Otherwise, we need to assume the worst case scenario. For example, that they have very sensitive data. And so one logical question would be, what is the data or the scope of compromise that this attacker has, so that we can support the decision of, are we paying or not the ransomware? Or another question could be how material the breach is, so that we can decide if we need to report to the regulator. So reporting to the regulator would be the action, and the question that leads to that action, or the focus on specific information, would be materiality. And so very important to be focused on actions, and therefore to be focused on what information is needed for that action, and remove all the noise around. Once we focus on that, we can then delegate that to the dedicated team, and so that they can focus their own energy on answering the most important information. And it changes across or during the crisis according to the different discussions or different decisions that we need to make.
Okay. Yeah. So, maybe in this situation, maybe all these questions should be answered, but we just need to figure out who's going to be answering those questions and at what time they'd be answering those. And it looks like, people are in agreement with that. So probably, in this situation, our team, we got clear leadership, we have clear tasks that we need to do. We need to start with the when, how, and the scope, right? So that's going to be what our team does. There's probably in this situation, in most incidents, there's more than one person, more than one team working together. So it's very likely that in this situation, if we had another team with us, they would be taking the who's to give us. Maybe they can find other TTPs. Maybe they can find OSINT that we can then search for. Further broadening our scope. We can work together back and forth there. But for us to do when, the how, and the scope, I think that's going to be a good point for us to move forward here. So now we have a clear understanding of what we need to do. We need to figure out how we're going to do this, right? So if we're looking at how we're going to do that, we need to start figuring out which logs that we need to initiate these investigations, right? So if we're looking at it even deeper down there, so we know the when, the how, the scope, we need to start looking at initial access and data exfiltration. So if we're looking at initial access and data exfiltration, which of these logs would be beneficial for us to find these answers, right? To find these answers quickly and to help us progress through this incident response. Ofer, would you mind going in and letting giving us some insight onto why this would be important to have in an incident? What's the importance of, maybe getting these logs proactively, or what we can do with these logs to help us in a forensic investigation?
Sure. I just want, before I go into this, to answer one of the questions from the audience. We've been asked, what is the difference between incident and breach? And that's really a great question because we get it a lot over time. And for a starter, I'll say there's a lot of confusion and interchangeability between those two, right? And so an incident generally has a broader scope in terms of how big or small it can be, right? Incident can be as small as, we had a phishing attempt, and can be also used to describe, our entire company was compromised. And so we prefer to use breach when we talk about major incidents, because usually when people use that term, it's pretty obvious that something substantial has happened. At the same time, I have seen a lot of people use breach mostly in the context of data breach, and some incidents may not necessarily be that. And so they're partially interchangeable with some nuances. So that's for the answer. And now I'll go into the long discussion. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is move to the cloud is the complexity and the new challenges that the cloud has presented us in when it comes to forensic investigation. Historically, we'd have an endpoint, we go in, we take memory dumps, we take hard drive dumps, we can figure out everything on the machine. But when we move to the cloud, we're dependent on various logs and forensics artifacts that we don't necessarily own. They're provided to us by the provider, right? It's a shared responsibility model, and we're dependent on them. And they're complicated, scattered, and not always available for a long duration, right? So an incident may have started 6 months ago, and logs may only be available for 30 days. And so one of the things that every organization needs in order to be ready to deal with incidents in the cloud is the ability to keep and manage and be able to investigate a wide range of logs from their cloud, right? So we have some of those logs written here. When we look at an Office 365 incident, so Office 365 and Azure AD, which is usually the identity tied to that, has over 10 different data sources. And oftentimes when you want to look at one thing that a user did, which you want to figure out as part of the investigation, it could be spread across 3 or 4 different sources. If you don't bring them together and you try to use the built-in Microsoft interfaces, then you can oftentimes discover that you need to investigate one part in one UI and another part in another UI, and then correlating them is almost impossible. And again, if the retention is passed, then you don't have them. So it's very, very important to be able to collect those and to be able to make sense out of those. They're pretty complex. Every log has a different structure, different logic behind it.
Thank you. Yeah, so, with everything being said there, everyone that's listening, please make sure to go ahead and put your comments in. Let me know what you think we should do to move on. But before we do that, you said something there that the scattering of the logs. When you think about the host-based forensics, there's no scattering of that, right? You have that endpoint, you have everything you need for the most part to see what was going on that endpoint. And like you just said, you have 4 different logs here, and you mentioned more when you were just talking that we all might need, and they're all in different places. So yeah, hopefully that helps make some decisions here. And it did help us at Kaizen make a decision on what we wanted to focus on, right? So we wanted to focus on initial access and exfiltration. And we just asked what log sources we would want to look at. And we mentioned all the scattering of logs. We mentioned that there are multiple logs we want to use here. And we see here in the log sources that our team and, working with Mitiga, we've discovered we need to use these 4 logs to give us an idea of what was going on in initial access and exfiltration. So our team, we've proactively started looking at the real world attacks and building logic out that would help us quickly identify, known attacker behavior that can hopefully pivot us into a quicker answer, right? So we're making these TTPs and looking at these TTPs and making logic to determine what was going on here. And so we have 20 or so that we can look at quickly. Let's take a look at maybe 2 Ofer that your team is going to look into, so we can have a deeper dive into it. So one that we're going to look at with your team, as you mentioned, was going to be the sign-in MFA fatigue attacks, right? So a known attacker attack, keep bothering people, keep pushing, keep phone calls, keep texting until a mistake is made, or they just think something's going on and they're allowed access, right? And then the exfiltration point, anonymous SharePoint link created are maybe not malicious in normal time, but if we have this going on during an incident or during the time frame of an incident, that could be a really good pivot for us to look at to see if that was the tactic used to get data out of our SharePoint. So while we're thinking about other things that we could be doing, and if you have in the comments, if you have other things that you think we should be checking, or if you have another idea that you think would work here for initial access or data exfiltration, please go ahead and throw that in the comments and ask us questions. But while that's happening, Ofer, can you maybe talk to why our team here, why Kaizen working with Mitiga, why we decided to use these, notebooks and use these predetermined logic to figure out what we're going on here?
Yes. So as I explained before, right, there are a lot of logs, a lot of data is in the log. So one of the great things in the cloud, most cloud providers would be pretty verbose with the data they provide. The difficulty with such verbosity is that there's a lot of data there. And so investigating manually on that data, trying to identify potentially hundreds of different IPs that attackers may be using is very challenging. And you're looking at MFA fatigue attack. It's actually split between 2 different logs. There's one log which is sign-in logs, and the unified audit log. One would show the MFA, the other would show the sign-in. So just figuring out this manually could be hours of work. And similarly, trying to identify a single data exfiltration technique out of potentially hundreds could be days or weeks of work in some cases. What we created in Mitiga, which what we call forensics as code, is every piece of understanding of how to investigate something like that, every technique, every indicator, everything we do, we have automation that can run on all the data and extract the relevant data out of that. Somebody may still need to look at that, but they're now looking, instead of trying to find a needle at a haystack, they're now looking at a little plate of hay with the needle in it maybe, rather than the full size. And that makes the investigation very efficient. When we go into a scenario like that, we're going to run multiple, like you showed in the previous slide, multiple of these TTPs that could be the initial attack vector, multiple of potential data exfiltration. And through that automation, in a very short time frame, we're able to conclude, the questions you had. how did they get in, and probably most importantly, what data do they currently have, because that influences our decisions regarding the ransom payment.
Great. Yeah. So, and you brought up speed again, and that was like a normal topic that we talked about in the very beginning when we're talking about why we need to prioritize, why we need to have this plan in this, because we need to do this quickly, right? We in this situation we want to get back and doing Halloween, but in real life, we need to get these answers fast, right? We don't have time to sit here and wait around. We don't need to go back and do we don't need to go back and do research if we don't already know what's going on. We need to be able to, we see an incident, let's go ahead and kick this off so we can get answers as quick as possible. And there was a good question I want to throw your way over, if you don't mind. How do we know if a log has forensic value? So we asked about a bunch of logs, and then we said we're using these 5 logs, and then you mentioned more that even in that sense, MFA fatigue, it needs 2 different logs. So could you maybe run through that for us?
Sure. So that's really a great question. I'm happy it was brought up. And this comes up a lot with our customers. And the short answer is there's no easy answer. And that's part of what we're doing in Mitiga. So when we learn and we research every technique, every tactic, we look at all potential available logs, forensics artifacts, types of data that we can collect. It's not just logs, right? It could be configuration snapshots. It could be an image. We look at all these and we determine which one of those we need to be able to investigate that. And we bring that logic back to our customers. So when we onboard a customer, we work with them to look at, do you have, or do you collect, or do you allow us to collect the right logs that are needed for a specific type of forensics? And through that, we're able to help organizations become ready, right? Become ready by collecting the right data. And it's a great question because it's not trivial one, and not a lot of knowledge around that in the world yet.
Okay, so if we take a step back and where we're at right now, we've seen that we have something weird going on in SharePoint. We've went ahead and said we're going to treat this as an incident. We start an investigation. We have a team. That team was given a clear task, and then over that team, under your command there, or let them know what to do. We've started running notebooks. We already have research out that we know what's going on, and we're hopefully waiting to get these answers done quickly, right? So we're not looking at a needle in the haystack, like you said. We're waiting for this output so we can analyze it and tell them what's going on. So I think we're in a good spot to move into the next phase of what we would need to do here, which was analyzing that data. And so if we analyze that data and we were able to, we decided that there was really those 2 indicators, those 2 suspicions that we had that could be it. We did see that those were our initial access, and that was our exfiltration point. So there was a user that fell for MFA fatigue, and then the person was able to get in and exfiltrate data and put in those ransom notes in that aspect. Through further scoping, because that was one of the things we wanted to determine, right? Through further scoping, we saw that the severity and amount of data was low, right? So we went ahead and ran that up. We let leadership know that was what we were going to, that was our scope. It was low in that area. And that also the user that was compromised did not have, global admin or anything along those lines. They're just a normal user. So with those analysis steps being done, we determined that we were not going to pay the ransom, and then we were just going to move into containment. So we contained the user. We made sure there was no more persistence. We didn't talk about persistence there, but we mentioned earlier that we have different groups that are going to have different focuses, right? So that was a focus of a group. They made sure there was no persistence, and we made sure that we removed the anonymous link that was out there. So we feel good. We feel good that we've done our analysis. We feel good that we've done our containment, and we're not in an active state of investigation right now. We're not in an active incident. But how do we move from not being actively investigating to closing our incident out, right? So we want to talk about, what it would be the highest priority during post-incident activities, right? So we have lessons learned, update playbooks, ownership of action items, and reporting and documentation. So, or E, all of these, might be due. Ariel, can you, while we have everyone putting comments in the chat, or asking questions, working collaboratively there's something else you think we should do? Put that in there. But while that's going on, Ariel, can you maybe go through and let us know why this step is important to have? Why can't we just say, well, we did our investigation and we're done, let's move on with the next thing?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the temptations when we are, dealing with the crisis is once we finish with the analysis, the containment, the remediation and recovery, we have this temptation to go back to business and that's it, we're done, which is a great mistake. There is a very important phase in dealing with an incident, which is a post-mortem or lessons learned, in which we actually are making the most, in terms of organizational learning, the most of this incident. So if we were lucky or unlucky enough, unfortunate to have an incident, let's make the most of it in terms of improving to avoid this or be better in the next time. This is why the post-mortem, the retrospective is so important, and we must not skip it in the process of incident response. And actually, NIST defines this as one of the steps in incident response. After containment, remediation, and recovery, we have post-mortem or lessons learned. And a few tips with regards to lessons learned. You should do that as soon as possible because the knowledge is there, and with time, people forget. So don't wait too long for this step. Delegate or separate that into different groups. One group may be focused on learning from the technical aspects, procedural aspects, etc., etc. And so split it into different groups, and then cross-correlate or integrate that into a list of conclusions. Be very focused on actionable conclusions, not just this and that didn't work. We didn't have the data for the investigation. It's not good enough. We didn't have the data for the investigation. Therefore, next time we need to have this and that. And here's the plan. And most importantly, here is the RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed description. That means this is a way to delegate or to turn actions into real outcomes by saying who is responsible for this specific action to improve or to close a specific gap that we identify, who should be accountable, who should be informed and consulted. And so that defines very well the actions after the lessons learned, and then define very clear steps and follow-ups, milestones to see that the conclusions are implemented and you indeed are improving your capabilities all across the board to make the most of this unfortunate incident. So very important step, and we must not skip it.
And it looks like a lot of people are saying E here. And you mentioned the delegation of tasks and ownership of tasks. And delegation was mentioned earlier, and we were trying to figure out what questions we were going to have. And it was also brought up when we were talking about initial access, containment, or initial access, persistence, data filtration. So it looks like delegation throughout the entire incident response process is a really crucial step that we need to do for a successful incident response. And so here with everyone, with most people, and it looks like saying E, I think that I would tend to agree. And based on what you said, Ariel, I think that you would also agree that all of these are important to do, and we shouldn't skip any of them if we want to have a successful closure to our incident response, right? So with that being said, I think that our team worked through figuring out what we needed to do once we were seen with that ransom note, right? We then delegated our tasks out. We figured out what logs we needed to use to answer our questions. And then we used, as Ofer mentioned, we used our predetermined research, predetermined logic to get those answers fairly quick. Everyone wanted to get back and have fun for trick-or-treating today. So we used those answers to get it quick. And we were able to get that information up to our people that needed to make the decisions. And we determined that containment and eradication was enough for us here. So with that being said, everyone in the comments, please continue to ask questions, and we'd love to answer them. Please reach out, and we'd be happy to answer anything that you have for us. Ariel, would you like to have any closing words, or Ofer, any last words there?
Yeah, definitely. First, I want to say thank you, first and foremost, to the audience, both people from Mitiga and outside Mitiga, for the participation, active participation and engagement. To Ofer and Cody, to you guys for sharing the stage and helping us to deal with this incident. And maybe to wrap up, I hope it was a fun exercise, a brief one though, but we did touch important things. I want to mention them. First, the incident response plan, having a document that guides us through the incident. Second, the importance of forensic data lake and the uniqueness in this area with regards to cloud and SaaS. Next, the importance of having the expertise and the knowledge to investigate cloud and SaaS telemetry. And then the importance of closure, lessons learned, looking back and improving from the incident. These were the main topics that we touched in a very, very brief event, but I think, and I hope that it was enlightening. Ofer, do you want to share some of your insights from this incident exercise?
Sure, and I'm actually, if that's okay with you, I'm going to tie it to a question that we just got from the audience on how long does it take to answer these questions. And you know, there's a famous question: how long is a book? And so the answer varies greatly, and it's tied to my closing words. The length on answering those questions is really, really dependent on how set up you are for this event. If you're ready for an incident, if you have the data in place, if you have the right tooling and the right team, you're able to answer these questions very, very quickly. And we're talking, you know, minutes, hours at most. And if you're not set up very efficiently, then it could take days and weeks. And we've seen incidents where this takes weeks. Why? Because you don't have the data, you don't have the tooling, you don't have the team. It just takes a few days to bring up some IR company that gets set up and tries to get the data and makes up facts and tries to get forensics without having the right data. And this difference is immense. If you look at various statistics on the impact of breaches, the single most important aspect is time. The shorter you are to recover, the shorter you are to respond, the lower the impact is. And you know, now with the need to report to authorities, to regulators within a very short time frame, that's even bigger. But generally speaking, and to get it short, you need the data, you need the tooling, and you need the people, like everything else in life, right? And this is it. If you have one takeaway from this, is don't wait for your next incident to start being ready for one, but start today by getting all that pieces in place now. Back to you.
Great to summarize. Again, thank you very much, guys. Thank you to the audience, and hope to see you soon in the next exercise. And until then, feel free to reach out to us with any question or comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.